This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is an organization expert and owner of Neatly Balanced. She transforms lives through recreating the sacred spaces of homes. She then rehomes the discarded items to nonprofits and charitable organizations, helping mothers and babies, the homeless, those in halfway houses, and so many more. Clients not only receive a refreshed space in 2 to 3 hours that reintroduces a sense of sanctuary, but also get to see where their donated items changed others' lives. Her clients range from influencers to single dads, to overwhelmed moms, to college students, and more. Her idea for Neatly Balanced originated on a mission trip where she encountered people surviving with only the clothes on their backs. She uses this experience as an inspiration to push for a minimalist lifestyle where resources are utilized for the less fortunate. With over a decade of experience, she has connected with other women-owned and led businesses with a passion to see more women supporting women. In her free time, she loves to travel with her husband and provide tips and tricks on lifestyle hacks through healthy living, traveling on a budget, and turning messes back into functional living. Please welcome founder and owner of Neatly Balanced, Kristy Edwards. Welcome.
Thank you. That makes me sound like a lot more than I feel like I am. So thank you for all the kind words.
Well, reading through your bio and reading through the intake form that you sent over, you are a lot more than maybe you think you are. And we maybe need to work on some positive affirmations for you because, it's one thing to start a company of helping people be organized, but it's another thing to start it because of an experience that you had, such as the mission trip to Honduras, and how that impacted your life. And it impacted you, but it took some time to found this company and do what you do, and continue this mission through the work that you do. So I think you deserve some credit and some positive affirmations from yourself of, yeah, you know what? I'm doing some good stuff over here.
Thank you. It means a lot.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about, we're going to get into some fun stuff. We were kind of talking off camera about sports and, your Clemson football helmet there, and we're going to get into some of your adventures and everything. But while we're on the topic of Honduras and your mission, why don't you tell us a little bit about that trip and how that inspired Neatly Balanced?
Sure. So I guess before the missions trip even took place, a big reason it took place, my father passed away from cancer in May of 2010. And fast forward a year after that, the church he and my mom were a part of, my mom still is a part of, planned a missions trip to Honduras. And we found out through other people in the congregation that one of my dad's friends in the church had actually requested that the chapel that we were going to be building be named in memory of my dad. And so when we heard that, we said, oh my goodness, we have to be a part of this. So my mom and younger sister and I all took the mission trip as well. And we spent 5 or 6 days. It was back in 2011, but it was, but the better part of a week in Honduras. We flew into the airport, and I say that lightly because at that time it was just a strip of grass. And we kept looking out the window like, where are we going to land? And then we left the airport and got on a school bus, like the big orange school buses that had no air conditioning. And we drove for another 5 hours into this very remote village. And then after that, we got on a cattle truck and stood up in the back of this pickup truck, about 20 of us and all of our supplies for the week. And we then rode another probably 20 or 30 minutes to literally the end of the road. And the driver said, here's where you get off the truck. And we sort of looked and we were like, where do we go? And he's like, just over the mountain. And we were like, what? And we literally scaled the side of a mountain, sidestepping for about 2 hours to get down into where this village was. And there were just people everywhere, literally existing with the clothes on their backs, no shoes on their feet, sleeping, on rocks or in man-made huts, and just surviving on rice and beans and plantains, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. And it was just unlike anything I had ever seen. And so we built this chapel and did like a little makeshift vacation Bible school for the kids and made pipe cleaner flowers with coffee filters and, spent 5 days with them, and it just completely changed my life. So it was sort of the catalyst for starting this business, wanting to be able to help give back to those less fortunate.
Definitely want to get into more of what that environment looked like. But first, I want to also acknowledge this landing strip, because it's actually pretty well known that the Honduras landing strip is one of the most dangerous landing strips there is in the world.
Yeah.
And I have a cousin who was with somebody who lived in Honduras, and he traveled there, and he came back and he was just like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I'm ever going to go back there again, because it is so scary to fly in there. And I don't know that they've changed it. Do you? When was the last time that you went back?
It's funny. I actually have not been back, and I just through about 6 months of trying and finally successfully finding the person that was our translator and leader for that week. Just about 6 months ago, I was able to track him down and got information that he is still there. He's still working with the people there. They have since built 3 more chapels, because the chapel we built, they have grown out of, and they have more people moving to that area because it is one of the only remote villages that has a chapel and a place of worship for the people who live there. So they've built 3 more chapels, and I, through my business, have started giving back a portion of all of our proceeds to the people in that specific village. And we've already helped fund the building of the 3rd chapel. And then we've also been able to supply school supplies for every single child in that village for this school year. Mm-hmm. So that's been really fulfilling and just more than I ever dreamed I would be able to be a part of. So I told him just last month when he sent me updates and pictures, I said, I really want to come back. So I'm hoping I can do that in the next year.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard much about that landing strip, but I know that it's pretty scary because it also goes over like a mountain, and like it's almost like if the plane doesn't stop, it's going over the edge, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's very frightening.
Yes. So I want to make sure that we're very clear here. This is scary just to get there.
Yes.
And so let's get into a little bit of, I feel like, the feelings that you felt when you got there, because you get there, you take this long journey, and the plane trip in itself is a lot. And we just talked about the landing strip as much as we could. But then, of course, a hot, sweaty bus. Some of us have all experienced something like that. And then now you get on this other truck and everything. And I'm kind of like trying to see the difference now between appreciating what we have here in the States and where we are, and being able to just, if we're gonna go volunteer for a place here in the States, it's like we get on like an air conditioned bus, or we carpool with a friend, and we drive there, or heated, depending on the season, right? But in this environment, you don't get that opportunity. And so I wonder about some gratitude in terms of that, because then you get to see the people, and then you see how they're living. And I'm interested in your feelings that you had when you saw them.
Yeah, the first word that comes to mind is overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed the whole time we were there. Yes, for sure, with gratitude at all that we have here in America. But I just kept saying to my mom and sister every day, I said, these people have not stopped smiling. It's as though they don't realize they have nothing. They were the happiest people. they were more than happy to give up, again, their makeshift beds, which was just sleeping on the ground floor. They let us have their little makeshift house and sleep on the floor, and they slept outside of the house. And when I say house, again, there was no roof. It was like a tarp. And, it was just nothing like I'd ever seen before. But they were giving us the little bit of food they had. And they were like, you eat first. We'll eat if there's leftovers. And just this overwhelming sense of them wanting to give us what little bit they had. And, again, the kids were in and of itself heartbreaking because none of them had shoes. They were all in this one school building together, and we took a bunch of soccer balls that had not been inflated, and then we inflated them for them and handed out soccer balls. And you would have thought we had given these kids a bar of gold. I mean, they just were like, oh my gosh, my own soccer ball. They were so excited. And we played soccer with them and sat in on a couple of the classes that they were doing. And yeah, it just, again, I just keep saying, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it was unlike anything I've ever seen before or since.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so for me, my background, just for your information, I think some of my listeners know this already. So I'm half Haitian and have visited Haiti when I was a little kid. I have not been able to go back since. And also my other side of my family also is Dominican. So my aunt married a Dominican. And so I used to go to the DR all the time and actually just got back not too long ago. And also witnessed environments like this where we went to the villages and saw this. So what kind of like rings true for me and what you're saying here is they didn't realize what they don't have. And I think about like, you don't know what you don't know. And that's almost a blessing because then you can be very grateful for what you do have. I was just saying that we're grateful for an air-conditioned car. But from what I know, from what I've experienced when I've gone to towns and villages like this where what we would look at as less fortunate people, they don't see themselves as less fortunate a lot of the times. They keep their house well organized and cleaned. And as you know, right, from what you experienced when they gave you their bedrooms and everything, they keep it to where it's up to their par, and they're very proud of it. And I think there's a lot to say about that in our world today of materialistic lives, especially in the States or in countries like ours, where we want more, and that's great to strive for more. But I think it just comes back to me in terms of like just appreciating and being grateful for what we do have and just being proud of that, right?
Yeah, totally. I came back with such a sense of appreciation and gratitude for what I had. And it's something I try to keep sort of in check because for years before that, and even after that, I was a full-time nanny. And when I first moved here to Nashville, it was actually to be a nanny in the music industry. So, that in and of itself is a job that is a luxury. It is not something that people with no money are doing. So even just being a nanny, you're going into these multi-million-dollar homes, you're going into these homes where, all the kids are just given more and more of everything. And, everybody has multiple cars. A lot of them have multiple residences they travel to. And just being surrounded by that, back even then in 2011, when I took this trip, I came home angry. And even my mom, she kept looking at me and she was like, sweetie, people don't know what they don't know. You can't get mad at people in America because they have a lot of money and choose to drive, fancy cars or carry designer handbags or have 4 homes. Like, they don't know what they don't know. They've never been here. And I was like, I know, but we just live in this country and people just think more is more. And like, it was like something sort of snapped in me. And it is something that I constantly have to keep in check, even now that I've started my own organizing business, because there yet again, that's something that is a luxury that the normal American may not have extra money lying around and think that they can afford. So even some of our clients, are living this life of luxury, and you can't get mad at them for having a lot of things or having nice, fancy things. You just have to, just keep that sense of gratitude and that sense of appreciation for all that we do have.
Yeah. And I think that there's nothing wrong with wanting more and having a lot of things. I think it just goes back to what you just said, that sense of appreciation. And I want to acknowledge this trip that you took, this mission trip, because I think that that's really how we understand it, right? Because, you and I can talk about this and we can have a listener on the other end right now who has never done a mission trip or never seen poverty at the level that we're talking about. And therefore there's a a misconnection there, a miscommunication there, or a disconnection there is what I mean to say. And that's why I think volunteering and spending time doing things that, where you witness things like this is so important, because by volunteering, by seeing this kind of environment and witnessing it is when you can really appreciate what you do have. And I think it just changes everything going forward. Totally. So I love that. I mean, and I think it's so powerful for everybody to hear. Our listeners, as you may know already, are entrepreneurs and are business leaders and are people that are striving to do more in their lives and in the world to earn more too, right? So I think it's so important that while we want to earn more and we want to do more and we want to build these huge businesses and do all this, that we keep in mind that it's important to appreciate what we have and to give back to others.
For sure.
In your intake form, part of what you mentioned to me was that you were inspired by your parents, and you just mentioned that the chapel was built to honor your father and his life, and in fact was so powerful that it was named after him. And so I'd love to just take a step back now from your business and from the mission trip, and kind of just go back into time into what started this all. What sparked your father's interest in helping others and in doing so much in his church and community, and your mother and your family.
Well, both of my parents came from humble beginnings, and even when I was a kid growing up, we definitely did not have fancy cars or even multiple cars. We had one car, and we didn't have beach homes and all of these luxuries that so many people have now. And my parents both, it was a humble beginning, and they both worked really hard to give us everything that we needed and most everything that we wanted. But at the same time, even when my dad found success in his company, he was in law. So to back up, he was in education. He and my mom were both teachers. Then my dad began working in law enforcement, and he was in law enforcement for over 20 years. And then after that, he ended up starting his own private security and police company that had contracts all over multiple states, where they would go in and provide, personal security services for people, for businesses, for, gated living communities, places like that. And so even when he found success, later in life, when I was in probably high school, is when all of that kind of started. They still were sort of like, don't get a big head. You're not getting a car when you're 16. Like, you will drive the car that your mom drove, and she will get a car. And so at 16, I was driving this like clunker of a Ford Escort that was like 15 years old at that time, that sometimes worked and sometimes did not work. And every time I would gripe about it, they were like, you don't have to drive anything. You can rely on your friends for rides, And so they also instilled in me a strong work ethic and a strong sense of, earning what I did make. And I can remember my very first job ever I was probably 8 or maybe 9, and I walked our neighbor's Cocker Spaniel. She was the sweetest neighbor ever, and is still a close friend of my family. And she worked all day and was not married and had a dog and needed somebody to walk the dog every day. And I remember I made $1 a day, so $5 a week for walking her dog 10 or 15 minutes and giving him a treat afterwards. And my parents still made me tithe to our church, a 10% of that. So I had to take 50 cents every Sunday and put it in the offering plate at church. And, that was something that was just instilled in me from an early age. And for us, it was, the Christian aspect, but it was still, this money is not only for you, it's to give back and help other people. And the church that we were a part of was very strong and mission minded. And so we had missionaries all over the world. And the way my parents chose to explain it to me was, this money is going to go help these missionaries who are teaching people about Jesus around the world. So again, even as a really young child, I was very aware that people all over the world were helping those less fortunate and, talking to them about Jesus, and also providing food and clothes and things like that. So yeah, it really goes back to my childhood.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one thing that I can't, that we have to stay on because I love it, is your parents both, your father coached women's basketball and soccer as well. And I'd love to hear, a little bit more about that. My wife and I just got into coaching. My wife coaches our oldest daughter's soccer team, and I got into coaching my youngest daughter's soccer team because I don't know that much about soccer, so I need to. And then I also coached both of their basketball teams. So I love that. So I'd love to hear some more about his coaching experiences.
Yeah, that goes back actually to when they were both in education. My father was the principal of a private school in my hometown, and he is it was just before I was born, and then also when I was like a really little baby. So my understanding is that he sort of single-handedly made that school successful and took it to like the heights of its popularity in the community. But he also single-handedly started the athletic program. So when they got to where they had enough students to start offering that, they didn't have any coaches and they didn't have any money to bring in coaches. So my dad was just like, I'll do it. So he was the principal. My mom was a teacher, and then she taught, and then she also was the cheerleading advisor. They started a cheerleading squad. And then until they could hire people to do this, yeah, my dad coached men's and women's basketball, men's and women's soccer, and I believe men's baseball. He was the coach for everything until they could, find people to come in and sort of relieve a little bit of his responsibilities.
And your mother was so they got both sides of the field.
Yeah. She was a cheerleading advisor.
I think that, I bring up the coaching part, and one, because of course, like I just said, I'm interested because I got into coaching now and really enjoy it. But I think what I've learned from coaching is that there's also a give back element there too, is even coaches that are paid and teachers and anybody who's educating or trying to share knowledge and help others, even if they're paid for it, there's a service mindset to it. Of giving back. And so I think that, when we're talking about mission trips, we're talking about all this other stuff, it could also just start with, hey, just volunteer and coach like a youth football
Totally.
or soccer or basketball team or a band or whatever it is. Just volunteer and do something like that, because you'll learn so much more about yourself, but you'll also give back so much more to your community in different ways. That's really cool that he was able to do that.
And in doing that, regardless of what it is, I try to encourage people to change their wording. And instead of saying, I have to coach, I have to volunteer, I have to do this or that, just say, I get to. Because it is a blessing, like I see people daily who have been injured or who have health issues that keep them from being active, whether it's, amputees or just, hey, I'm really sick and I'm bound to a wheelchair, or, just many different reasons why they can't do these things. So I just try to always, again, going back to that grateful mindset, just look at it as something that you get to do instead of something you have to do.
Yeah, I love that you said that, and it makes me think about another kind of like quote out there that you probably follow, and I'm interested in your perspective on it, in that everything happens for us. Things don't happen to us, they happen for us.
To us, yeah.
They happen for us. And so I'm interested in this because not because of your father's we're going to talk about your father's story in terms of this question, but this came up before somebody else had passed away who was also a huge community member and did so much for the community. And it was like, why do the good die young, and why does this happen to people that do so much? And so I'm interested in your perspective of using the quote of, things happen for us, not to us, and your father passing away so young of cancer at 58 years old. I'm interested in how you and maybe your family were able to keep this in perspective of how is this happening for us, for somebody who's so vital to the community.
Well, to be completely honest, I try really hard when doing interviews and talking about things like this to not dive too deep into religion. Because I know, some people are, some people aren't, and I don't ever want to come across as pushing my beliefs on someone else. But to answer that question, I have to just be spiritual about it.
That's fine.
My family, we are Christian, and that was how I was raised. That's how I still am today. But specifically at my dad's funeral, I will never forget walking down that aisle of the church with I was on one arm of my mom, my sister was on the other arm, and we sort of all walked down together. And right before we walked into the church, I was just incredibly angry. I was sad. I was brokenhearted. I was grieving, but I was just really angry because I kept thinking about so many people I know or that have been in my life who, didn't have a father, or their fathers were just horrible people, or they lived in really toxic situations because of the hands of their father. And I just remember thinking, why couldn't it be those people? Why couldn't it have been this deadbeat dad that is worthless and that is not present in his children's life? Why did it have to be my dad, who was just like the best of the best? I was just really sort of simmering in that anger. And we walked into the church and sat down, and because of who my father was, my mom said to the pastor that did the service, she was like, Paul, that's my dad's name. She said, Paul would want more than anything else for at the end of the service, you to give a brief plan of salvation, because if someone can get closer to Christ through his death, that's what he would want. So after everybody got up and spoke all these really sweet words about my dad, the pastor just kind of relayed that message. And he was like, this is a request from the family. I would like to just, give you a brief plan of salvation. And if anyone would like to accept Christ as their savior or get right with God or get closer to God, whatever that looks like for you, take this time to do so. So everyone sort of bowed their head and closed their eyes. And I still get cold chills even now just talking about it. It went on for probably a good 5 minutes where the pastor was just like, I see your hand raised. Thank you. I see you. Thank you. Like people all over the church that were just making these, rededications of their life to the Lord, that my mom and sister and I, all three, just broke down in tears. And even after the service, my mom said for weeks after, random people that my dad taught in school or that he worked with, in law enforcement, just people that they hadn't seen in years, came up to her and were like, I was at the funeral, and because of your husband passing away on Sunday, my whole family was in church, or we started having daily devotions, or we started praying before meals again. And just to see the impact of my father's death had on all of these people spiritually was something. I just looked at my mom and sort of shared that with her and was like, I was so angry walking into that funeral service. But when you look at this, how can you be mad? And so hearing that quote comes full circle from me, because I'm like, yeah, his death did not happen to me. It happened for all of these people who were affected positively because of it.
Mm.
So it helps all of our kind of anger and sadness in losing him. And then it also helped, the trajectory spiritually for all of these people that were affected, because of being at his funeral.
That's exactly what I was hoping to hear, because that's what I try to think of too. Like, because that quote works really well in day-to-day things, of like, why is this happening why is this happening to me? Oh no, it's not happening to me. It's happening for me. Okay. How's the traffic happening for me? Oh, maybe it's, whatever it is, right? Maybe
the traffic is always happening to me.
Right. Maybe I'm saving on gas mileage, or I'm missing an accident or something like that. Right. And so it's kind of simple to put it into those perspectives, and maybe on a day, oh, why did I lose this deal? Oh, I lost it for me. Maybe I didn't want the client, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But when we hear of somebody who's so great and does so much passing so early in their life, we do wonder that, right? Like, how is that happening for them or for their family? And so I'm so happy that you were able to share that with us. And I appreciate the fact that you brought up religion and that, it's not for everybody. And that's true, right? Like, I mean, my show is not about Christianity or Judaism or Muslim or anything. It's really I don't tie myself to any religion, but I do believe that there's a spiritual being, an energy, a universal energy, whatever you want to call it, out there. And I think whoever's listening, whatever you attach that being to, whatever you attach that higher power to is what we're talking about. I think, at least for me, when I'm hearing about religion, is that, whatever sect you are, whatever, type of Christian or type of Jew or type of Muslim or type of Buddhist, whatever you are, it just is all attached to some sort of higher power and some sort of energy that's around us. And it's kind of like tapping into that. And how can we tap into that on a different level? So I'm happy that you mentioned that, hey, look, even if you're not Christian, I think you could understand what you're saying there of just getting deeper.
Just take something, take something out of what I'm sharing and apply it to your life, however it applies best.
Yeah. So after that moment, and I just want to stay on the happening for us, and you sharing that, so many people were affected by this, and you did this plan of salvation. Two questions here. One, just kind of more of an identification of what a plan of salvation is. And then two, I'm just interested on what changed in your life. So you were young, you were 27. I know that the mission trip was huge, but after seeing how that happened for you, I'm interested in how that started to change your life from there.
Absolutely. Well, as a Christian, I was raised Baptist. So there's a little bit of a variation depending on what denomination you are, even as a Christian. There's Methodist, there's Presbyterian, there's all these different versions, I guess. But as Baptists, we believe that to go to heaven, you must accept Christ as your Savior and confess your sins. And so they always say the ABCs: you accept, you believe, and then you confess. So you accept Christ as Lord. You believe that he died on the cross and rose again and intercedes for us into heaven and will someday come back and take us to heaven. And then you also confess your sins. And for me, the confession has always been the easiest part. Some people are like, how do you believe in something you can't see or accept that? But regardless of whether you're religious or not, we all do bad things. And whether that bad thing is, you hit your little kid sister or you murder someone, it can be anything from, this little tiny infraction of a little white lie, or it could just be something monumental and huge. We all do bad things. And so for me, the confession is just sort of like relieving that guilt from yourself, just saying, hey, I know I've done something bad. I know I've done something not great. Please forgive me of that and help me not do it again. None of us are perfect, but we can always strive to be better than we were yesterday. And so that's just a very simple plan of salvation. And then we believe, if you accept the Lord and you become a Christian and get saved, then you'll go to heaven when you die. And, it's funny, over the years, I've had a lot of people in high school and college and even as an adult who have come to me and said, I believe I was raised Catholic, where it's a lot of it's based on good deeds, or I believe this way or that way, and it's based on works and things like that. And that's how you go to heaven. And to all of them, I say, I think with all of us being human and having our human minds, there's always a little bit of doubt in all of us, even those of us who are Christian and who do believe in Jesus. That's like, is this real? Like, is this fake? I don't know. There's always going to be a little bit of that doubt just because we're human. And so my sort of answer, and this is just coming from me as a person, I've always said, to me, it's just so much more freeing to live my life believing that, hey, I'm going to mess up every day. All I have to do is say I'm sorry and actually mean that, and mean that I wish I hadn't made that bad choice, and try to do better tomorrow. To me, that's so much more freeing to just know I can do that at any time, anywhere, and I'm still going to go to heaven when I die, than to live my life stressed out, hoping that I've done enough good works that when I die, I'm one of the few that are chosen to get to heaven. To me, that just seems so stressful and so like full of fear. And I personally would not want to choose to live that way. And I said, at the end of the day, if what I believe is false, all you've had to do is pray a prayer and say you're sorry for your sins. If what you believe over here and this whole like works-based thing is false, you've lived your entire life stressed out. So, just breaking it down into very simplistic human form, I'm like, I'd much rather live not stressed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Different perspectives and different ways of viewing it all. And I like that you brought up the human mind and doubt. There's doubt in everything. Sometimes I'm like
everything.
Sometimes I'm like I'm a God-fearing believer, and then sometimes I'm like, I think the science thing. I think it's just universe. I'm just all into believing in the sun here. I still am unclear as to which direction I go. But just for your purposes, I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy till I was 20, but I no longer think I wouldn't call myself a Catholic today. I would just say that I'm more of a spiritual person who just I do believe in more of the energy of the universe and just believe that everybody's good and is going somewhere good when we're all said and done. So speaking of doing good, I'm interested in now. So your father passed, and you have this perspective of things happening for you. And seeing the good that came out of his passing and all the lives that he impacted, could you share how that started changing your life?
Yeah. So this whole organization thing started not long after I moved to Nashville. Like I said, when I was a nanny in the music industry, I always just sort of had this kind of down in my heart stirring of like, I know I'm meant for more, but I don't know what more is. And when I first moved here, working in the music industry, I thought this must be it. Like, I've reached the pinnacle. I come from a really small town in North Carolina where I was born and raised. And when I first moved here, I was working for a contemporary Christian music group, and everybody in my hometown was just like, it was like version of Madonna or like Michael Jackson or whoever you look at as like this huge icon. People in my hometown were like, well, it doesn't get bigger than that. Like, she's huge. And I was sort of like, yeah, this does seem like a big deal, but I still was searching for more, whether it was in nannying at that point I was 22 when I first moved here, and it was like, oh, I just want to get married and have a million kids. And, it was just, there was always more that I was sort of looking to and striving to and hoping for. And So then when I was still nannying, I just started the couple days a week that we would be off the road. I would sort of still go to the house and help out with the kids so the parents could do interviews or record a new CD or whatever it was they were working on. And I just started saying, hey, could I clean out the clothes that are too small for them, or could I clean out the toys they're not playing with and, donate these things to like Goodwill or whatever and help those less fortunate. And they were like, yeah, of course. And what I kept noticing was I would go to Goodwill or one of these other well-known entities, and the employees would just kind of act annoyed. And I'd be like, hey, I have donations. I'm here to help people. And they would be like, okay, yeah, just dump it over there. And or they would wheel out this bin that was already full of lamps and other breakable items and be like, yeah, just dump it in here. And I'm like, well, I'm going to break that lamp, or this TV is going to get crushed, or, and I would just even then be like, there has to be more than this. Like, I can't just be dumping things and breaking things in the process of trying to help. And all the way back then in, 2006 and 7, I started researching, what other places in Greater Nashville can I help? And again, just being surrounded by so much, I was just very naive and was like, is there even anybody that doesn't have anything here? Everybody seems to live in mansions and drive fancy cars. I couldn't imagine that there were poor people or people who were homeless in Nashville. It just seemed glitz and glamour. And I was very quickly met with the realization that, oh no, there are people on every street corner that are homeless or that, lost their job and used to live in maybe a mega mansion and now they're living in their car or whatever. And I just quickly became, surrounded with all of these organizations that were tangibly helping those less fortunate and were happy to do so. They weren't annoyed by my presence. And so I started volunteering and working and kind of putting my stamp of approval on these places, seeing that, yeah, you drop off a bag and an hour later, we're taking that same bag and giving it to people here and here and here. It's not just getting dumped in a warehouse somewhere. And after forging all these relationships, it came in really handy when I started Neatly Balanced in 2020, because I already had relationships with so many, and it has just grown. And I think it's also given other organizations the ability and the freedom to reach out and ask for help because they see how many people we're helping every week. So it's just been kind of a hand-to-hand organic growth that I'm very thankful for.
It's interesting. You're right. You kind of like reminded me of, I'm guilty of this, of going to Goodwill with a bunch of stuff and kind of asking, where do I put this or whatever? And I'll just dump it over there. And I was happy to get rid of it. And while, of course, I want to help people and give to people, I didn't even think the way that you thought. So I got to commend you for that I was like, all right, good. Here, I'm dumping it over here. I was like, whatever. But it does happen. The workers there are overwhelmed. They're underpaid for their, most of them are volunteer, if anything. And so, they're there just, trying their best, but they're overwhelmed. And you're right. People, and like I said, I'm guilty of it. People do see it as like a dumping ground of like, I don't need this anymore. And how do I get rid of it? I feel bad putting it in a dumpster. So let me just put it all in a bag and bring it to the, Goodwill or whatever. And I love that what your work is that you're trying to find a place for it and not just dump it somewhere. And I think that's like going the extra step, which is so important.
Yeah.
And I love that you're sharing that with us about going that extra step. I am interested in this, and I don't know if you could share it, but I'm gonna ask it right here with you. Okay. Are you able to share of any of the stars that you got to work with? Because I know you worked with some influencers and some big names. Are you able to share any of those names? Are they allowed to be put out there?
Yeah, I mean, I can't share specific names, but I've worked with multiple country music artists, Christian music artists. I've also worked with Titans players, Predators, hockey players. I'm still trying to get in with the Nashville Soccer Club. Haven't worked with any of them yet, but yeah, there's a lot of colleges around here too. But yeah, I mean, it's been fantastic. I definitely still have my dream list of people I have not worked with that I would love to, but it's been amazing to me, the people I have reached out to that I thought was a far reach, that when I've explained to them what I do, that have just been like, oh my gosh, I'm more than happy to help. How can I help? What can I do? And so many of them post about me on their stories or their feeds, and say, we put our stamp of approval on her. We work with her. If you're looking, go with her. Don't go with this person, go with her, so I greatly appreciate that. It's been
So many of
Very
them,
helpful.
yeah, so many of them come from humble beginnings, and right across the
Oh
hall,
yeah,
part of
for sure.
my intrigue comes from because right across the hall from me here, I'm at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie here, and right across the hall is the WWRD studio where they have where it plays country, and they have like a wall
Yes.
full of all the country artists there and everything. So every once in a while when you go in there, and I don't know if you saw earlier, my producer came in, Uncle Mike, and he hosts a show with them, and he also goes down to Nashville and also has some stuff going on over there with some artists. So it's very
That's
interesting.
awesome.
So it's kind of like right
Yeah.
around me in here. I'm not a big country person, but it's like right around here. Although I have been getting into this one country artist that I really like. And it's because of my daughter, because there was a ballet dance that they did to one of her songs called Rainbow. And I can't think of the artist now.
Casey
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes. Yes. And I love her remake of Neon Lights.
Yeah.
I've been loving that song. I like literally have played it on repeat, like so much. It's just such a nice. There's just something about it and the way that she sings that I just love her voice and her melody. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah. She's very soothing.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's very, very soothing. So that's where some of my intrigue comes from. I was just like, all right, I'm feeling this country thing now. I mean, the most I knew about country is Garth Brooks, and I was like, all right, that's what I know.
He lives just down the road. He lives near us.
Oh my goodness, that's so wild. Yeah, for
Yeah.
me growing up, so I grew up in New York City, and country was not what we were allowed to listen to.
Oh, sure. Of course. Big city.
Growing up in New York City, it's like if you listen to country, that wasn't cool. That wasn't cool. Not until today. Today, I think that there's such a nice mix of all the different genres now, right?
There is. Yes, for sure.
It's really cool on how hip hop and country and all these different types of and pop all have like come together, and it's just like, hey, you know what? Like, we're just making music to entertain people. We just like it all. It's pretty cool.
I know.
So getting back to Neatly Balanced now. So, I mean, obviously we talked a lot about how you give back and how you do so much and how you've been inspired through missionary work to be giving back and donating. But on the other side of this, you have this business. And, I love Tetris and I love organizing things, but it is so hard to break down a closet and to break down a house and to try to get it organized and to get rid of things. Of course, when you're emotionally attached, it's a lot harder. But even when you're not emotionally attached for other people too, it's kind of hard. So I'm very interested because you mentioned that you had a knack for doing this from a very early age. So speak to us a little bit about how you discovered this like knack for organizing and decluttering people's environments and your own.
Well, even as a kid, I mean, even as a little girl, I can remember in my nightstand, I had, all of my pens and pencils were separated and lined up specifically. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I'm OCD, but I definitely know that things have a place and I like for them to be in their place. And even when I try to be a rebel and like leave my dirty clothes in the bathroom floor or whatever, like they'll sit there for an hour and then I'm like, okay, no. These have to go to the hamper. And my husband even knows like the hamper, it's one of those sectional hampers. So it's like we have a section for darks, we have a section for lights, we have a section for things that need to be washed with bleach. And everything has a place. So it's something that has definitely been a lifelong, I guess, obsession of mine. But yeah, I think that my approach is a little bit different. And I tell my clients and even just friends upfront and honestly, I would say my publicity team probably gets annoyed because I freely talk about other companies and other brands that are doing the same thing. And they're like, you should not do that. Focus on you. But I tell people, there are certain companies that will come in and rainbow color coordinate your things. And if that's what you want, that's probably who you should go with, because our focus is on minimalism and purging things that you're not using. So while we are not mean or hateful about those things, we definitely come in and we're like, okay, you got 60 pairs of shoes. We definitely can get rid of 10. We're going to encourage cleaning out the things that you are not actively using versus being like, no, we'll just put the browns with the browns and the pinks with the pinks. Like, we're going to encourage cleaning out and helping people who maybe don't have any shoes at all. So that is one thing that's a little bit different. And then also when we organize, we try to do it in an easy way, in a tangible way that is going to set you up for success so that you're not coming in tomorrow going, oh no, where does the yellow tank top go? Does it go with tank tops or with yellow things? I don't know. We try to just say, hey, we hung all of your tank tops together. We hung all of your sweaters together. We hung all of your, t-shirts together so that you at least know, okay, I want a t-shirt, here they are. Or we also encourage, the kids to get involved because listen, I was a nanny for a gazillion years. It is hard to get kids to clean up their messes. So, with that, it's like, okay, instead of telling your kids put the blocks with the blocks and the trucks with the trucks, just have a storage bin or a toy box or whatever it is you have, and just tell your kids, put your things away, put your things in the box or in the cubby. You can't get super picky when you're dealing with a 5-year-old or a 2-year-old. Just encourage them to put their stuff back off the floor. We can get nitpicky when they're a little bit older, but if you're working from 0, let's just try to move to 1, not all the way to 12, So our approach is a little bit different than other organizations, but I feel like that's what makes so many people want to work with us because they're going to be able to keep that up when we leave.
Yeah. And you know what I like too that you said, which was that you believe that people want to change if they only knew how to change. And so it sounds like you're kind of showing them the way of how they can change, right?
Yeah. It goes back to what we were saying when we first started talking. People don't know what they don't know. So if you've never lived in an organized fashion, you don't know what you don't know. But when you see, all of your cookbooks are off of the kitchen counter and they're in a cabinet, it probably makes you want to keep your books in the cabinet and out of sight versus being cluttered all over the countertop. So again, we just go back to what matters most. And every client is different. We definitely have clients that are meticulous and OCD and want everything arranged by color. But the vast majority of our clients just want to live in a more functional household that resembles organized.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be perfect, but just teach me how to start being a little bit more organized. So again, we say, what matters to you? Do you want to have your countertops clean? Do you want your kids to start being responsible for their own toys? What is it that is most important to you? And let's start there. So start small, and then you can build on that in the weeks and the months and the years to come.
Yeah, and getting to know your customer, your client is really important in understanding what they are. And I also like the fact that you prioritize functionality over organization because, for sure, to your point, if it's overly organized, it's going to fall apart. The person's going to pull the cookbooks back out of the cabinet. They're not going to know how they go back. And eventually, it's a good way to keep you in business, right? You're going to get called a couple months later and like, hey, can you reorganize the cookbooks? And you're like, oh goodness, didn't I tell you how to do this? So it's a really great way of doing it. I love that you were able to share a little bit more about your business. And as the founder of the business, I'm also interested in how you kind of came about, we talked a little bit, or at least I read a little bit about your leadership style and being a gentle leader, and that means that you've hired people. So you've grown this organization from where it was just you're coming off the tail of being a nanny and being a babysitter, or being a babysitter and then a nanny, I guess, right? You're coming off the tail of that, and you're like, okay, I'm going to learn how to do this and start, eventually building this business to where now you have employees and teams and so many more clients and growing it. But I just kind of want to go back to the beginning of founding the company because, again, so many of our listeners are in those beginning stages or maybe have surpassed those beginning stages but are interested in how could they have done it differently or maybe gain some insight from the way that you did it. So if you could share a little bit about how you did start the company from more of not necessarily the organizational part of doing the organizing, but more of really like the nitty gritty of starting a company.
Yeah, it just sort of started, again, a little bit accidentally. I thought, okay, I'm reaching the end of my nanny years, and I'd already had told the family up front, hey, I think you're probably going to be my last nanny. So I'm happy to sort of adapt as you need. If you need less hours, if you need more hours, that's fine. But just know that as you need me less, that's okay. Because I sort of had this like stirring in my heart. I just didn't really know that it would take off the way it has. And so unbeknownst to me that COVID was coming, I launched my company March of 2020 and was just sort of like, this will be fun. Like it's spring cleaning, this is a great time to launch. And literally a week or two after I officially started advertising just on social media, hey, I'm starting a business, the entire world shut down. And whereas I think any other business would have suffered immediately, mine shot to the stratosphere immediately because everybody was home and was therefore cleaning out closets and cleaning out attics and cleaning out garages. And they were seeing my posts again on Nextdoor and Facebook. That's all I've ever done until about 6 months ago. I've never paid for advertising. It was all word of mouth. And I was posting to Facebook, posting to groups I was a part of, posting to Nextdoor, reaching out to families I'd previously nannied for and said, hey, you have great connections. Can you just tell your friends about me? And people were seeing these posts and were like, oh my gosh, yes, we're cleaning out our garage today. We can keep 6 feet distance. Can you come over and just help us take our stuff away or, help us put stuff back or whatever? And it immediately, I think I had like a 3-week waiting list within a week of starting. And within a month of starting, I was up to a 6-week waiting list. Again, that sounds all like amazing, but it was because I was still full-time nannying. And so I was nannying all day and then I was organizing every night. And so, lest I get the big head and think I was just so famous from the beginning, it was just because I was basically doing 2 full-time jobs. I was, again, nannying all day and then working every night, every single night, working every weekend, getting no sleep. I used to joke that I was married, but I didn't know my husband because we barely saw each other for those first couple of years. So yeah, that was kind of how it started. And then obviously I got traction really quickly and just said, okay, this could actually be a thing. So then I went to the clerk of court and all the, little stepping stones you have to take to create a business and get a working ID number and file your taxes and all of these things. I did all of that and was up and running in just a couple months. So it was definitely a success story that I did not see coming.
That's incredible. Yeah. So it sounds like you really started more of like a grassroots out of the air quote out of your garage type of business where it wasn't no structure, no formality, just more of like some Facebook posts. And these were to your personal page, I guess. You didn't even have a business page yet?
Not at the time. I built my own website myself, and then I just basically moved over my personal Instagram and turned it into my business Instagram. And then I created a business Facebook page. And that was all I had literally until 6 months ago. And I just started advertising in a magazine 6 months ago, and that's exploded to another whole level. And at that point is when I started hiring employees to work with me. Yeah.
So just to kind of, again, recap a little bit, and then I want to go into where you said exploded to a whole new. So it was more of again, grassroots, really just word of mouth, going to your connections. I love that idea. I started following Alex Hermosi, I think his last name is. I might be saying his last name wrong. And I love this one marketing strategy that he brought up. And he said, I'm going to get you your first 100 leads. And he said, just go to your social media, go to your email, go to your phone, and just start reaching out to the people that you know and just start offering your services or letting them know about your services and seeing if there's anybody that they know. And that's like literally what you just said, which was you reached out to people that you know in your network and said, hey, here's what I'm doing. Do you know anybody that I can help? And I think it's such a great strategy because you're not selling that person. You're making them aware of what you do and having them kind of think about people that you can help, which in turn, they're thinking about you and your service. And they're like, wait a second, I think I could use her. And so they're hiring you too, which is pretty cool.
Well, and you know what I did? I this is probably like giving away a free tip, but hey, I'm here to help. I went on Instagram to a few really big deal singers or famous people that I was already following. And I sort of stalked who they were following. So I went to their page and I was like, Faith Hill, Jessica Simpson, Carrie Underwood, whoever, that's who people that I look up to and are my idols. But whoever it is, they are going to have no clue who I am. And they also probably have people running their pages for them. But I would go to their Instagram page and I would click on their followers and I would look at who they followed and look at, who had more than 5,000 followers that they were following. And I would contact that person. And I was like, okay, hey, you're so-and-so's hairstylist. Hey, you're so-and-so's fashion stylist. Hey, you're so-and-so's nail person. Like, you do their manicures, like whatever. I was reaching out to all of these people, some of whom were, again, stylists and like their people. But then I was also reaching out to influencers who were sort of starting up and had, maybe 10,000 followers, but not yet 1 million. And I was reaching out to these people, like these secondary people, and saying, I don't mean that in a bad way, but just to try to get, footing. I was reaching out to them and saying, hey, I will come do one space in your home for free. If you will post about me on your socials and tag me, I will come and do, you'll get 2 hours for free. And almost every single person I reached out to was like, oh, this is great. Yeah, we have stuff, of course. And I started giving away my services for probably 6 months. I made like $50. And it was just, they would tip me at the end of the night and be like, hey, here's a 20, like, thanks for coming. And I'd be like, $20? Like, this doesn't even cover gas right now. But it was just like, okay, great. Thank you. And then they would post about me and I would get 20 new followers. And then I would do it again the next night and go home with a $10 tip. But they would post about me and I'd get 50 new followers. And within a few months, I had grown, like 200 followers. And I just kept doing that for probably 6 times, built my following up that way. And then it gave me credibility with some of the bigger named people. I was like, hey, I work with so-and-so. They said they know you. Would you hire me? And that you can pay. And it sort of exploded that way because they were like, oh, you work with them. They've now exploded into being a really big deal and they work with you. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll work with you too. And I always tell people, I was like, you got to be willing to work for nothing when you're starting out with a new business. And then the little bit of traction leads to more traction. And then you grow and then you get paid.
I mean, it's incredibly brilliant in that, you collaborated with these different people and for your services. I think that you did get paid, right? Because, I mean, how much would it cost for you to work with them? It
was free advertising.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't free. You worked for it. It's sweat equity, right?
Right.
How much would it cost if you asked that influencer, hey, listen, can you make this post? It'd be like a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
And so you actually were getting probably paid more per hour than you are.
Probably.
You probably were getting more then than you are now, to be honest, right? Just to some extent. But I think that's really smart. I love that. I wrote that down in the collaboration and getting them to post about you, I think is so brilliant in getting them to say that. The other thing that I heard you talk about there is kind of like this transference of trust, is that by working with one person in this like circle, in this network, that trust transfers to the next person. And more and the person that you want. So I think that's another smart way of doing it, where you were targeting these certain people intentionally because you knew that if you could get in the door with them, that trust would get transferred to the people that you want to work with eventually, and that could afford your services through money, not through collab.
Well, and it's also worked tenfold in other ways. From being a nanny for so long, we don't have any kids of our own. And so I think a lot of times people look at us and are like, well, why would I talk to her about kid stuff? She doesn't have kids. But people who know me or people who have gotten to know me know this background of, 25 plus years of being a nanny. And some of these influencers and people I've worked with now have gone on to have babies and have then ended up reaching out to me, calling me, texting me, sending me DMs through Instagram saying, okay, so you were a nanny. What do you think I should do about this? Or how should I do this? And it's resulted in not tons, because that's not really what I'm trying to do, but it has resulted in a couple paid, consultations with people who are just basically asking for consult. Like, hey, we're having a baby. What should we get? What should we not get? What should we splurge and spend the money on? What's not worth the money? The difference between daycare and nannying, just so many questions that I'm like, oh, I never saw that coming, but that's been a blessing too. Cause I love kids and I love talking about kids and helping people, who have kids. So.
And it's so smart for people to reach out to you, even if you don't have kids, because you nannied for so many years. I think you had put 10 years or so right here, because you nannied for so many years. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was in the music industry for 10 years, but I've been nannying for close to 30.
Close to 30 years, right. So where I'm going with that is that you've experienced so many different products. You've experienced so many different situations, so many different things that, look, nothing's going to outshine, I think, any mother and their intuition and what they have. But the truth is that, like, my wife and I, we have two daughters, Denise and Tenley. And the truth is that we really just know one one way of doing things to some
Sure.
extent, right? We know certain products that we used, and that's pretty much it. We know that those products worked for us, and we would recommend those. Like the diaper genie was fantastic. We use that, right? But but I think to the point that you're making of 30 years is that you got to experience the diaper genie and the diaper whatever, and you got to experience 10 of them. Right. You got to experience 10 of these different items, and you can say, look, these are my top 3, and and you could probably put them into budget categories and why one is better than the other in different situations. So I think that it's so smart for people to reach out to you in terms of that, because those 30 years are so many different experiences that you're able to share from different point of views. So it's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, it has been.
That's really, really cool. I want to just really touch on, before we get into kind of like wrapping up and going into some of the great non-for-profit work that you do, because there's just so much more than just building chapels. You do so much more work, which is so cool. But I just want to have a little fun with you here, because when we first got on, I saw your little Clemson football helmet to the left of you. And so if you could share a little bit about the significance of that helmet and how you got it, because I thought that was a pretty cool story that you started sharing with me earlier on today.
Yeah, well, I've been a lifelong Clemson fan. My dad was born and raised in South Carolina. My grandparents, my aunt, uncles, and cousins all lived in South Carolina. And so it started out as just this. I was 4 years old. My grandpa, uncle, and my dad were diehard South Carolina Gamecocks fans. And just to tease my dad, one of my cousins was a Clemson fan, and she was much older than me. She was a teenager when I was like 3 or 4. And she would sort of razz them on rivalry game day and would be like, oh, Clemson's so much better than South Carolina. And just sort of looking up to her, I was like, what's a Clemson? And she's like, oh no, it's the Clemson Tigers. And I remember her walking me to the TV, and that was back in the 80s, where Clemson's white uniform just had like an orange paw on their helmet. And she goes, do you see the hat? She called them hats because I didn't understand what that was. She goes, do you see the fancy hats? They have a tiger paw. And I said, yeah. And she goes, that's the good team. We pull for the good team. The other team is the bad team. And that was literally all I knew. And so I started at like 4 being like, I like the good team. They have the tiger paws. And that's all I knew. And that sort of carried over into my aunt and uncle thinking it would be really funny to give me everything Clemson themed for Christmas that year. So I got like a Clemson cheerleader outfit and a Clemson sweatshirt and a Clemson like little kid's beanbag and all these things that were just Clemson, much to my dad's chagrin. And so when I realized how much it like teasingly bothered him, I just ran with it. And so for years, did not know anything about football or basketball. And I was just like, yeah, I love Clemson, love Clemson, love Clemson. And then I think it was in high school probably, or maybe early college, I sat down with my dad one day and I said, okay, I'm tired of people making fun of me because I don't know anything about sports, yet I always talk about how much I love Clemson. I was like, teach me what I need to know so that I don't sound like an idiot. And I can remember we watched an entire football game together, and I said, what's the difference when they tackle a quarterback and when they tackle one of the other players? And he was like, that's called a sack. And I'm like, okay, so a sack is a quarterback, a tackle is a player. Okay, what does the down mean? Why is it, 3rd and 7? What does that mean? And he explained that to me, and just, how we got 6 points, and then we made it to 7. It was the extra kick or a field goal, just all of the basics. And I was like, I just feel like I've learned a new language. I now can watch a game and understand what's going on. And the funny thing was, in high school, I had a bunch of just buddies that were guys. I never was dating them, but we were just friends. And I would go to all of the football and baseball and basketball games and cheer on my friends, and would sit next to their girlfriends who were filing their nails, being like, oh yeah, tell me when to cheer. And I was like, okay, your boyfriend just, hit a home run, or your boyfriend sank a 3-pointer or whatever. And I was like, you need to cheer. And then, later on in high school and in college, I think every single guy I dated was an athlete of one sport or another. So I quickly learned about all the different sports.
Yeah, you said that. You said you're a big sports fan.
Yeah, big sports fan of all the sports. But yeah, I'm still a lifelong Clemson fan, and I was really enjoying our 7 years of being fantastic. And now we're sort of struggling again, but I know the best is yet to come, so I'm sticking with them.
Yeah, I heard that they did really good. And so, this helmet came because you were doing a silent auction, you said, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm on the Junior Service League here, and we had our annual gala, and we had like a silent auction, and there were several autographed items. And instead of the fancy spa days, I was wanting to bid on all of the sports related items. So I ended up winning this Clemson helmet, and it's autographed by Tommy Bowden. So it's it's sitting on my desk in a prized position.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to make sure that we break down the gender walls. Just so you know, you just taught me something about football. 'Cause
Oh,
I'm not a big football person. I'll definitely watch a game because if it's on and it's just fun, and I get into any sport almost. I'll
yeah.
say any sport. But I did not know the difference between a sack and a tackle. So you
Oh
you
my
just you
gosh.
just literally taught me that. I thought they were the same thing.
Well, and if you tackle a player in the end zone and they have the ball, that's called a safety, and so
That
your team gets 2 points.
That I do know because I am
Okay.
I am a Jets fan, and we just had a safety. So over the
Yes, you did.
so
Yeah.
as a Jets fan, you learn those ones. Yeah, and I
I'm a
also
new.
go ahead.
I don't like to be a bandwagon fan. I try to stick with what I stick with and whatever, but I have been a fan of Aaron Rodgers for many years. And so I was a Packers fan because of Aaron. And now I'm slowly, I think, going to come over to the Jets side because of Aaron. I just really hope he doesn't retire and gets in at least one good season with them because I really like him. I don't want to see him go out with an injury. I want to see him go out with like a winning season.
I'm gonna warn you right now. It's a tough team to root for. It's a fun team to root for. The fans are fun, but it is tough. I'm similar to you in that my older cousin influenced a lot of the teams that I root for.
Yeah.
And I didn't know much about some of the sports. So like I was a Rangers fan, which is hockey, and I don't think I've ever sat through an entire hockey game. I know who Wayne
Oh, I
Gretzky
love
is.
hockey.
Yep, and so I don't know hockey, but I would say I'm a Rangers fan, and people would talk to me about hockey, and I'd be like, I don't even know what that means. I didn't know.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. So I'm very similar in that, and he raised me a Jets fan, and so thanks, Nikki. That's my cousin who raised me that. The good one he gave me was the Yankees, so I got to experience some good World Series out of that.
Oh, I'm a
And
Mets girl, so
you're a Mets, you said?
yeah, I'm a Mets fan.
That's so interesting that you're a New York fan coming from North Carolina. How did Mets happen for you?
Well, yeah, so I'm
Because
a
they're
Braves
not
fan.
they're not a big winning
I
team, the Mets.
I always seem to go for the underdogs, and it's not
Okay.
intentional. I don't know. Was born and raised in North Carolina, so I'm a diehard UNC Tar Heels basketball fan. Although when North Carolina plays Clemson in football, I pull for Clemson. But when North Carolina plays Clemson in basketball, I pull for North Carolina.
Right.
I don't know. It's just kind
You
of
were
always been my
you
thing.
were brainwashed. That's why we got it.
My mom, I will say my mom is a diehard Tar Heels fan. But yeah, in baseball, I was born and raised my entire life a diehard Atlanta Braves fan. And I remember their glory days of winning the World Series in like, what was it, 95 or 96? I still to this day have a team set baseball card collection of the Atlanta Braves team set the year they won the World Series. I have no idea if it's worth anything or not, but I still have it. Um, but it's funny. So I live in Nashville, and years ago when I first moved here, I was friends with a guy who was the strength and conditioning coach for the Nashville Sounds AAA baseball team. And so the girl he was dating at the time and I became friends. So I would go to a lot of the games and just sit with her because she would go for him. And David Wright, who was the Mets first baseman for a
Yeah.
long time,
Yes.
was he third? No, I think he was third base. Anyway,
I think he was
infielder.
first base. I think you were right.
Okay, yeah. So he played with the Mets for a really, really long time, and he came through on the farm team when the farm team played the Sounds. And my friend introduced me, and it was just a really quick, like, oh hey, good luck tonight, whatever. But I remember, back then I was single and footloose and fancy free, and I was like, oh, that's my Mr. Right. Like, play on words there. And so I followed him all the way from being on a farm team, AAA, till he got into the majors. And I just became a Mets fan because he played his whole career with them. So that was where the Mets kind of thing came from, was years ago watching David Wright when he was a nobody, and then when he got his big break.
That's so cool. That's such a great story. So I'm from Queens, which is where the Mets play, as you know. And everybody assumes I'm a Mets fan, but I was raised a Yankee fan. I'm similar to you in the sense of like basketball is my sport, and I follow the players more than I follow the team. So I really drive people crazy because I root for players, not teams. So I do understand that feeling, but that's so cool. I love that story of David Wright because I do remember him. And I believe the Braves would have been 95 because I think the Yankees
95.
won the 96 World Series.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I think it was in 95 and then I don't know what happened in 97. I forget who won that one, but then the Yankees went on a streak there. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I love your sports. How like you're just so like knowledgeable on all these different sports. My wife is similar in that I was just showing people a list because I did a talk on gaining your inner trust, and I was talking about keeping promises to yourself. And my wife had checked off her to-do list, wash my hair, and I thought that was so cool. So I was like, I'm going to bring this list to this conference that I was doing this presentation for, and I'm going to show them that she checked off wash my hair, but I didn't read the list first. So anyway, I'm there live in person, and I have all these people out there in the audience, and I'm just like talking about like you got to keep promises to yourself. By keeping promises to yourself, you build your inner trust, and by building your inner trust, your inner confidence grows, and it grows from keeping small promises. And small promises could be just as little as like my wife's list here, and I go to look at the list, and it says football, soccer, and all this other and all these, and then it gets down to wash my hair, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I was like, and I told them I was just like, my wife's so cool, look at her. But she's like she has all these football picks, and then she coaches soccer, as I said. So she had all these different things planned. I was like, I love that she's got it on her to-do list, and I didn't even see it ahead of time.
I had a fantasy football team multiple years in a row, and one year I was the only girl in my league, and I won. So that was sort of my claim to fame. I was like, girls can win at sports.
Yes. Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah. My wife has won hers is a, what's it called? I don't want to use the wrong phrase. It's a knockout thing. I know that they've changed the name and I want to be sensitive to that, but so it's a knockout league. And she's won.
I was going to say, when you were talking about being a Yankees fan, my dad was a lifelong Yankees fan. And in 2008, my sister and I decided, my parents had never been to New York City, and I had been a couple times with work in the music industry. And my sister and I took my parents on an all expense paid trip that we paid for. We were broke as a joke, but we had enough money that we had saved to take them to New York. My dad insisted on driving because he would not step foot on a plane. But we drove. We actually stayed in Jersey, but we took my mom to her very first Broadway show. And my dad had always wanted to see the Yankees play, and we scored impossible to find tickets the summer of 2008. And took my dad to a game at Yankee Stadium in the final year before the original Yankee Stadium was torn down.
Yes.
And we didn't tell him about it until we were on the subway on the way, and we pulled out the tickets, and we were like, Dad, we're going to a Yankees game. And he was like a kid on Christmas morning. He was so excited. But I insisted on wearing my New York Mets hat. So I went to a Yankees game, but I wore my Mets hat.
You were that girl. I know who you are.
I was that girl.
I saw you there. That is so cool that you got to bring him to the original. There was such a charm.
It was super cool.
Yeah, there was such a charm to that old stadium. I mean, it's nice to have the new stadium, but that old stadium was really, really cool. And just knowing who played there previously, I think, is what really made it that. And then that '08 team was such an awesome team. And in '09 they won, and then I retired from watching baseball ever again. I want to get back to your passion for giving back. You know, we just talked about how, you know, this whole sports conversation was spawned by the silent auction that you did for this board that you serve on, and you do so much more. And I'm going to name some of these, and you could definitely expand on the one that you choose because there's so much to this. But you currently work with the Nashville Rescue Mission, Hope Clinic for Women, the Cumberland Crisis Pregnancy Center, Mother to Mother, 1035 Ministries, Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition, Shower Up, Turnip Green Reuse, The Little Pantry, Dress for Success, and then some senior living facilities in Nashville. I think it's so important to acknowledge all of these places that you have served in their communities, served on your board, served in their communities, have volunteered, have donated to, and continue to work with, because sometimes we just donate to one charity or just donate to one place, and that's fine. That's really great when it touches your heart. But to be able to give to so many different organizations, I think speaks volumes of your work. And I would love if you could just expand on some of these or whichever one you want to just talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, the assisted living facilities and nursing homes, that is actually one of the only places we work with that's not a nonprofit 501c3. But all four of my grandparents spent time in hospice or in nursing facilities before they passed away. And I just remember the really depressed feeling of walking down these halls and seeing these rooms with residents who had no visitors or who had, no drawings or picture frames or anything from their families that were just kind of dumped there and forgotten. And just how even my own grandparents would live for our visits, whether it was 5 minutes or 5 hours. They were like, "You're here. We're not alone. Thank you." And so it was really important to me when our clients maybe don't care a ton about getting that tax deductible donation receipt, and when they're just kind of like, get our stuff where it needs to go. We love taking items to these assisted living facilities because so many of the residents are forgotten and overlooked. And one of our clients that we just worked with about 2 months ago was downsizing from like a 7,000 square foot home. And her mother had been very artistic and had handmade all of these decorations for every holiday for the year. And she said, "I don't want this stuff to just get thrown away, but I don't really know where you would take it." And I said, "Do you care about receipts?" And she goes, "No, I just want it to go somewhere." And I said, "I have just the place." And I took, I kid you not, probably 3 carloads of 50 plus boxes of handmade, centerpieces for the dining room table and ornaments for a Christmas tree, just all these things that her mom had made, and took them to about 3 different assisted living and retirement facilities that we work with. And when I tell you, not only were the residents thrilled, but the employees that work there, they were like, "You have no idea how we scrounge around through all these, like a Walmart or even a Goodwill or somewhere trying to find stuff for cheap because we have to pay for it out of our own pocket to decorate these places for all the different holidays." They were just overwhelmed with gratitude. So when I say that it really is important to me that this stuff gets taken where it's needed most, that is very true. I tell my clients it's going to be a 2 to 3 week turnaround time before you get your donation receipts after we finish working with you, because your stuff is not just dumped. It is brought to my home where my team and I sort through it and separate it. And then we contact each organization and say, "Here's what we have. What do you need?" And then we actually take it where it is needed most. So yeah, it's just been a huge blessing. One of the other organizations we work with is Welcome Home Ministries, and they provide safe houses all over Nashville for men who have come through the rehabilitation process after being addicted to drugs and alcohol. And they're getting ready to open up, I think it's their 7th home. And every single home has to be furnished down to forks and spoons and knives, silverware. And so we work with them a ton. And a lot of the Titans and Predators players who are clients of mine are really great about donating their clothes every season, or, like the workout stuff they wear for practices and stuff. And we have taken so many bags of clothes to Welcome Home Ministries to help them. They try and set up closets for each man as he comes in, as it would be at his home. So they'll have, pants and shirts and t-shirts and shorts and stuff hanging in the closet, for their size. And we get so much stuff every single week. So that's just a couple examples. But yeah, we really do try to get things taken where they're needed. And going back to the nursing homes and assisted living facilities, even things like old magazines and DVDs, things that are kind of out of date that we don't really use anymore, these people have nothing else to do with their time. So we take a lot of board games, we take a lot of DVDs, we take a lot of old magazines, even from 2 and 3 and 5 years ago, to places like that, just to give them something to do.
Now they're reading those magazines. They're going, "This VR thing's really going to take off." I can't wait till 2023. But that's pretty cool. Of course, I'm making light of that, but that's pretty cool, and they certainly do need that. And I was fortunate that my grandmother, she was in an assisted living, but it was a very small one, and we got to visit with her very often. But to your point, there's always a need for different things in these facilities, and I visited other ones, of course, and have seen the need. And it is nice when you see that they keep it up to date, and when they add new
Yeah.
things, and when they're not just like, getting worn out, because, these assisted living facilities, they're built, and then sometimes in terms of facilities, they're kind of forgotten about. But when you're bringing new things there, you're revitalizing the place and reviving it. So that's really cool. I love that. I love that you're able to do that. You also, are part of a couple other organizations. I'm interested in the Cumberland Crisis Pregnancy Center, because that is definitely something that is, I think, important to speak about these days with all the different changes in the law and everything. And I'm just interested on how you're able to help these people.
Yeah, we work with them as well as Hope Clinic and Mother to Mother. They all three are in various parts of Nashville, but they all kind of do the same work. And that is, they take women who choose to give life when it's unplanned pregnancies, and they take care of both the mother and the child through multiple stages. So like one of them, I think, helps through the age of 2. And then another one helps through when the child starts kindergarten. And then I think the other one is kind of somewhere in the middle. But yeah, they provide everything from, during the pregnancy, post-pregnancy. They provide diapers, formula, toys, books, blankets, the whole 9 yards. So we do take a lot of items to those 3 organizations, and we love to help as much as we can.
So speaking of helping, I had asked you for your mantra, and you did share another one that I don't have in front of me right now, which you're more than welcome to share. But I think this was so nice that you shared a little bit of a story. Do you want to share the story, or do you want me to read it for you that you shared?
About the boy
Yes.
on the beach?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, share it.
It's a story my grandfather told me when I was a little girl, and it's just funny how you can sort of forget things and then remember things like when it's appropriate, like later in life. And I had sort of forgotten about that, and actually heard someone that I know that I've worked with in the past say this on her podcast. And I said, oh my word, that's the story Grandpa used to tell me. But yeah, so it's the story of a little boy walking down a beach, and he's picking up starfish and throwing them back into the ocean. And he encounters kind of a grumpy old man who just kind of grumbles and is like, I don't know why you're wasting your time with that. You're never going to save them all. And the little boy leans down and picks up a starfish and throws it. And he says, well, I saved that one. And that's sort of what I look at Neatly Balanced as doing. There's a million problems in the world from every shape and form and every way you look at it. And there's no way that any one person can fix all the problems in the world, no matter who the president is. But I'm like, if you can just find your corner of the world and change what you're able to change, or at least implement change, that to me just speaks volumes. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm like, I'm not going to even touch on world peace. I can't do anything about that. But if I can change the minds of people into living a more minimalist mindset, and realizing you don't need, 4 cars and 27 pairs of boots. You can probably get by with just 1 car and 1 pair of boots, or maybe 2.
It depends on the cars.
I just, I want to help where I can, and, just do our part.
That's cool. I love that idea too of like, you can here's the one that I helped, right? It's so true. And I think because, so it reminds me of, I had reached out to someone, his name's Father Rick Frechette, and he started a huge movement in Haiti to help the people of Haiti, and eventually went from just working out of the church to building an entire community, to where this community has a school and a tilapia tank and a bakery and self-sustained community, essentially, right? And so I had reached out to him several years ago, and I just told him I was overwhelmed. I was looking at starting a business. I was wanting to do good in my community and be a good father as well, and be present for my family. And I was overwhelmed. Like, how do I do all of this stuff, but then see this huge need in Haiti? And how do I respond? And his response to me was long. It was a longer email that he responded with, but essentially it was the same message that you just shared, which was, Michael, you can only do what you can do, and that's good enough.
Right.
And I thought that was so powerful. That was so powerful to me, to be able to just continue. So I love that you shared that story with us today. You have a pretty neat website that you built yourself, and there's so much in there. There's so much more about you that we didn't get to tap into. But I would love if people who are interested could learn how to find you, and maybe learn a little bit more about what's on that website that you have there. I know you have a lot of different postings. So if you could share all of that with our audio listeners here, that'd be great.
Sure. It's Neatly-Balanced. I always say don't forget the dash. It's neatly-balance.com. And then I have a LinkedIn, a TikTok, an Instagram, and a Facebook page, and it's at Neatly Balanced at all of those places. But I'm definitely the most active on Instagram. And especially if you want to reach out, that's the fastest way to get a hold of me. I check those messages a lot more than any of the other ones.
So cool. So cool. It's been so great having you on today. I'm so happy that we were able to connect and get you on here. We went through your PC to your phone to all different ways. But, as you know, where there's a will, there's a way, and we're going to connect great people here. I think that you were able to share so much great energy today with our audience and so many great tips on building a business through grassroots ways and giving back. So I want to thank you. I appreciate your time today and coming on today.
Thank you. And I did want to mention really quickly, we are based in Nashville, but we do travel nationwide, and we have clients currently in 5 states. So if you're located outside of the Nashville area, we can still service you.
Interesting. So why don't you just real quick, just what are the 5 states, just if anybody's in any of those, definitely to reach out.
Yeah, the 5 states that we're in pretty consistently is California, North and South Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky.
That's very cool. So we didn't even get into that.
Yeah.
I guess you have some virtual teams. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's super fun. And, going back to, I love to travel. So it sort of gives me an excuse to travel and work as well. So it's nice.
Awesome. So that's really great to hear. And what about New York?
I have a couple different people who are interested in working with me, and I did a couple consultations when I was there with my mom just last month, but not currently. So I would love to break into New York because it's a favorite for sure.
All right. We're going to have to keep that one on the board because I'm glad that you actually brought that up because, I mean, your work is so important to so many in terms of getting their house cleaned and decluttered. But what I really like about your work is, of course, you get that element done, but then you also are finding places for it in such a conscious way, like you had said earlier, where you're actually calling these different non-for-profits or these different organizations and asking them, what do you need? And then checking your inventory to see if you have it to be able to give to them. I really love that aspect of your business. And so I definitely hope that people in New York, that's my area, and in all these other states can reach out to you and find you to do that with you.
Well, and we also look for local organizations when we travel out of state so that we can help local organizations where we are as well. It's number one, it's we want to help everybody, but number 2, it's also really hard to travel with donations, especially when you're flying. So we like to partner with local organizations when we can.
Cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on today. This has been such a great time with you. And that's neatly-balance.com. And then they could find you on all platforms. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.